Tonight, rolling in resource money. The province announces a $1 billion surplus.
Well, that's good news. It also means the cost of almost everything you buy has gone up.
Also, as post-secondary students gather their supplies for back to school this fall, they won't be needing a mask. Plus, don't free your goldfish. The city of Saskatoon has scooped up hundreds of pounds of the family fish from local ponds.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It's Tuesday, August 23rd. CBC Saskatchewan News starts now. Hello, and thank you for watching. The Saskatchewan government has announced a massive turnaround in its finances. Thanks in part to a surge in oil and potash prices, the government says it's now expecting a $1 billion surplus. They now plan to hand out checks and cancel tax hikes. Adam Hunter reports.
Saskatchewan's economy is now firing on all cylinders.
Finance Minister Donna Harpower says for the first time since 2013, the province is expecting a balanced budget. She says it's partly due to high potash and oil prices. Those have been driven up by the war in Ukraine.
We didn't create the war. And yes, we are benefiting, and our commodities are benefiting, and we're not the only jurisdiction that is.
So this fall, we'll be sending a $500 affordability tax credit check to everyone in Saskatchewan aged 18 and older.
The Premier delivered that news late Monday. Harpower says to be eligible, residents will have to file last year's taxes by the end of October. She expects to send out 900,000 checks at a cost of $450 million. Now, Harpower and Moe had hinted for months that if the economy was strengthening, relief would be on the way. She says she wanted to wait until now to announce the rebate.
I just didn't feel comfortable making a relatively large financial commitment with very little data to base it.
The opposition says the government should have provided this relief sooner, and it says it should be spending more on healthcare and education.
There should have been meaningful relief for Saskatchewan people with cost of living over the long term, and there needed to be an investment that steps up to the challenge in healthcare with respect to surgeries and ERs that all too often are being shuttered and placed in bypass by this government. And for kids going back into classrooms that have been cut and impacted in such a dramatic way.
Harpower says resource prices are volatile, so it wouldn't be prudent to use it for operational costs in the healthcare system. The projected surplus is also allowing the government to retire up to $1 billion in existing debt and reduce borrowing. Harpower says that will save $50 million a year in interest. Public debt still sits at over $20 billion. The government is also scrapping a planned October 1st PST expansion on gym and fitness memberships and on children's activities. Adam Hunter, CBC News, Regina.
The $500 check is welcome relief to cash-strapped adults in the province, but some critics say children are being left out. Yasmin Renea has more on the mixed reaction.
Here in downtown Saskatoon, some people are celebrating the news of getting a $500 check this fall.
I think it's good because I need the money.
It's my fun money.
While others say the check will only take them so far.
Personally,
This father of four says it's tough to raise a family with rising costs.
give us some kind of relief, but at the moment, groceries, I'm assuming.
It doesn't affect us because we don't have children, but I feel sorry for families that are buying groceries and whatnot, yeah.
The NDP says the money should have gone to children too.
A parent with 3 children, a single parent with 3 children will get less than a couple with no children.
So this might be...
Experts are poking holes in the province's plan. A policy professor says handing out checks undermines the government's argument that Ottawa isn't giving it enough money to fund health care.
So it weakens their argument with the federal government that, in fact, the province needs more money to deal with healthcare issues. And of course, Ottawa is going to be reluctant to just hand over money.
It is inflationary.
An economics professor says cash handouts don't suppress inflation. They actually do the opposite, give people more money to spend, increasing demand faster than supply.
the actual solution to reining in consumers is not handing them more money in whatever way you want to do it, right? So whether that's a tax credit or whether that's an actual rebate check that comes in the mail, it is inflation, and it should not be done from good economic standpoint.
Moshe Lander says Saskatchewan should learn from Alberta's experience in 2006. The then Premier Ralph Klein gave every Albertan cash called Ralph Bucks from an energy windfall. Then the government's budget slid from surpluses to years of deficits as resource prices collapsed. It's something that Lander says Saskatchewan should take into consideration. Yasmin Ghanea, CBC News, Saskatoon.
A new Stats Canada report predicts Saskatchewan's population could grow by as much as 500,000 people by the year 2043, but only if immigration numbers increase. A Stats Canada demographer tells CBC News that Saskatchewan does not have a high enough birth rate to sustain the workforce. That and our aging population mean the province will need to rely on immigration for growth. On average, the province attracts between 13,000 and 15,000 immigrants a year. The challenge is outmigration to other provinces. In the past 10 years, Saskatchewan has lost about 5,000 people a year to other provinces. A Saskatoon woman who fled the U.S. with her son will return home tomorrow after spending weeks in a U.S. jail. According to the Canadian press, special agents will drive Dawn Walker to the Canadian border and release her to officials here. There is a warrant for her arrest in Canada for charges that include public mischief and child abduction in contravention of a custody order. Walker and her 7-year-old son disappeared July 22nd, leading to a massive search. They were located in Oregon City 2 weeks later. She's accused of using a false identity to cross into the States illegally, and those charges remain. But both the prosecutor and defense consented to her release back to Canada. Walker waived a formal extradition process, which is often lengthy. Saskatoon police say the woman believed to be the driver in a fatal hit and run last year has been arrested. Investigators had been searching for the driver who allegedly fled the scene in May of 2021. It happened in the 3200 block of 33rd Street West. The victim was 33-year-old Nicole Patty. She was pregnant with her first child when she was killed. 38-year-old Chastity Erin Kiplane turned herself in yesterday to Edmonton City Police. Kiplane says she's been charged with failing to remain at the scene of a collision which resulted in death. The former leader of the defunct Canadian Nationalist Party has received an 18-month jail sentence for assaulting 2 women in Regina in November 2019. Travis Patron received concurrent 18-month sentences for each count of assault causing bodily harm. Court was told one of his victims suffered a fractured wrist and the other sustained a concussion due to the assault. The sentence is considered served, though, because of credit he received for 390 days in custody. He's prohibited from owning guns for 10 years and must submit a DNA sample. Patron remains in custody on other charges after an unrelated disturbance at the Redvers Legion Hall. There won't be any COVID-related mandates for students and staff heading to Saskatchewan's main post-secondary campuses this fall. That means masking will not be required and there will be no proof of vaccination necessary. CBC News confirmed with all major institutions. This includes the University of Saskatchewan, University of Regina, and the First Nations University of Canada, as well as Saskatchewan Polytechnic, which has campuses in 4 cities. An official from that institution says they're ready to change the policy if community transmission increases.
Given the fluid nature of COVID-19, we may have to update our pandemic guidelines in the future. But that will be done through assessing the COVID-19 landscape and continuing to follow the guidelines of the provincial government, the Chief Medical Health Officer, and our health authority.
While it's not mandatory, the post-secondary institutions are still strongly encouraging students and staff to wear masks and get up-to-date booster shots before heading to campus this fall. The Saskatchewan Roughriders may not be having their best season on the field, but they're celebrating a return to profitability. The community-owned team is holding its annual general meeting tonight in Regina. Like most CFL teams, the Riders are working to bounce back after COVID-19 canceled the 2020 season and shortened 2021. The team is announcing a $3.9 million net profit for the 2021-22 fiscal year. And that's a big improvement over an $8.4 million loss the year before. Team President Craig Reynolds insists the team owes a debt of gratitude to the fans for getting back into the black.
Our fans were the number one reason. They kept their money with us, their season ticket money. They rolled that over to next year. We had very few requests for refunds, which would have challenged that number. And then we did a number of expense management measures.
He notes that family ticket packages have been very popular this year. Reynolds cautions, however, that full financial recovery from the pandemic will be a multi-year effort. When you think of a goldfish, it's usually little, in a small bowl. But in the wild, goldfish can be very harmful, and the city of Saskatoon is very aware. It just removed about 450 kilograms, or about 1,000 pounds, of goldfish from 3 Saskatoon ponds. Goldfish actually belong to the carp family, which means that they breed quickly, grow to be quite large, and can take over an ecosystem, pushing out all native fish. To get rid of them, the City of Saskatoon and the Ministry of Environment applied something called rotenone to Dundonald, George H. Clare, and Bev M. Dick ponds. A University of Regina biologist says the fish poison is fast-acting, degrades quickly, and isn't harmful to other animals, but it also kills all other fish in the water, not just goldfish.
There's a calculated collateral damage there, right? So the ministry and the city of Saskatoon have decided that the goldfish problem is more important than the native fish that are in those ponds at the moment. So they want to wipe out the goldfish, nip that problem in the bud, and then they can worry about reseeding or rehabilitating those ponds afterwards. The good news in Saskatoon is they're ahead of the curve there. So 1,000 pounds sounds like a lot of goldfish, but from an invasion perspective, it's really not that many. So they're at the front end of the invasion, which is great. So they're putting the rotenone in, they're doing a control, they've got the timing right. When you miss that first wave and you end up with thousands and thousands of goldfish, you get way more. There's places in Alberta where they're taking tens of thousands of goldfish out of individual ponds or small lakes.
Summer says there are really only 2 ways that a goldfish can end up in the wild. Goldfish in a backyard pond can escape in a flood, or an owner decides they don't want them anymore and dumps them in a city pond, which could end up with catastrophic results. A little bit of reprieve from the heat today, and that brought the fog in this morning. Your commute wasn't the clearest of mornings, and Ethan Williams is coming up in just a bit, and he'll tell us whether or not the warm temperatures will return. That's coming up after the break. Stick around. More than a dozen Roman Catholic churches have been put up for sale across rural Newfoundland. The money is to be used by the Archdiocese of St. John's to compensate victims of the Mount Cashel orphanage abuse scandal. But parishioners in these small villages say their communities are being forced to pay a heavy price to solve a problem they didn't create. Malone Mullen reports.
This modest church is the beating heart of St. Bride's. The people of this sleepy outpour built it and fixed it up over the decades. It's where babies are baptized, then get married, and where the community gathers to say its final goodbyes to loved ones. But even though Sacred Heart Parish is central to life here, locals fear they could soon lose it for good.
Our churches and our priest's house is going up for sale. And in order for us to obtain ownership, more or less, of it, we would have to come up with $540,000. That's nearly $1,000 for every person living on the Cape Shore, man, woman, and child.
Kevin McGraw says all 4 Catholic churches on the Cape Shore paid the St. John's Archdiocese $140,000, almost all their savings, to compensate victims of the Mount Cashel orphanage. They thought it meant they could keep their parishes, but last week, all 4 of them went up for sale.
It's hard to believe, it's hard to swallow that we will lose our church. People will work so hard to put it there,
Henry Kareen has gone to Sacred Heart his whole life, and he's been here every day since he retired, tinkering on the building and adding to its small museum. He thinks the Mount Cashel victims deserve the $50 million they're owed, but that the money shouldn't come from rural Newfoundland.
Sure, she come from the Vatican. Sure, she should. I mean, why aren't they responsible any more than we are, you know? Yeah, it's hard to believe, you know.
The way these parishioners see it, St. Bride's is about as far away from Mount Cashel as Rome itself.
There's no receipts where the Archdiocese sent us out money out here. We're operating on our own.
McGraw says Sacred Heart is more than just a building. It's a cultural symbol, a piece of living history. McGraw got married here, so did his parents and their parents, and now his daughter is hanging on to hope for the same.
It's a part of our history, it's a part of our culture. What else have we got in those little communities if we haven't got our church?
Malone Mullen, CBC News, St. Bride's.
The Rock Your Roots Walk for Reconciliation is back on in Saskatoon. It was supposed to take place in June on National Indigenous Peoples Day, but was cancelled due to extreme weather. Instead, the event will be held on September 30th to mark the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Thousands of people usually attend this event, which began in 2016. The walk is co-chaired by the City of Saskatoon and the Office of the Treaty Commissioner. Community leaders say it's a symbol of reconciliation and a commitment to change for the better. Indigenous and non-Indigenous people are invited to wear cultural dress, an Every Child Matters shirt, or any orange shirt.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital GMC Buick Cadillac, making back to busy easy.
Ethan Williams is now in with a look at our weather, and walking outside this morning, it was so nice compared to last week.
Yeah, that is true, Dan. We are seeing a nice reprieve from this heat, and what a week that was with all that warmth last week. But what exactly created all that heat? Well, here's a bit of a breakdown for you. So this was our upper atmosphere last Wednesday. It started with this big ridge in the jet stream over BC and the Pacific Northwest. That warm air was trapped underneath it. High pressure was helping to pump that warm southern air into Canada. And with high pressure, the air actually sinks around it. So that hot air was sinking to the ground. It radiated back off the ground up into the atmosphere, but it was getting trapped because of all that sinking air pushing it back down. So this created sort of this bubble effect, which kept the heat in place as it moved eastward. And this is exactly what created that heat dome we had last year. Thankfully, this time around, that heat bubble effect, not quite as intense. And we are seeing that today with our current temperatures hovering around the mid-20s in much of the province. A little cooler in the far north of the province, where we're only sitting in the mid-teens really at this point. We saw some showers move through east central Saskatchewan around the Yorkton area, so they are not even at 20 degrees at this point. And as you work your way westward, we're getting into those mid-20s. But the heat is coming back. We talked about that jet stream, and it is starting to reform in a similar shape as it moves eastward through the week. That in maybe not quite intense heat, but that heat is coming back, and it could mix in with some of the humidity that we have seen over the past little while. And that heat, not exactly great for the forest fire situation. We do still have an air quality statement in effect for the Buffalo Narrows, Isle Lacrosse area for some fires that are in Alberta and the Northwest Territories, and that likely going to stay with us for the next couple of days or so. Now, wind gusts will help things. They're not going to be all that strong over the next couple of days in the north of the province. They'll pick up a little bit in the southwest corner, but as we head into Thursday and that high pressure starts to build back in, it looks like most of us won't see wind gusts too out of the ordinary. We could expect some fog this evening. Again, as you saw earlier, we had that this morning in much of southern Saskatchewan, and we could see that again overnight tonight, along with some showers moving out of southeastern Saskatchewan. Some showers and thunderstorms possible in the northern half of the province tomorrow. For the southern half, I think mostly a sunny day. Those could linger heading into Thursday morning. But as we get to Thursday afternoon, again, we should see that high pressure and mostly just kind of dry conditions with some of that warmer air moving in. Now, with the fog, we could see visibility dropping, especially in places like Regina and Yorkton. And as you head into your morning commute tomorrow, it could be less than a kilometer in these places, very similar to this morning, but it will quickly burn off as usual through the morning, and we will be back at normal visibility levels as we head through the afternoon. Now, what is creating all this fog? We've had a lot of chances of of it over these past few days, but it's really dependent on relative humidity. They kind of go hand in hand with the dew point. So the more relative humidity we have, the higher that percentage is, the closer that dew point is to our actual temperature. And if there's less than 2.5 degrees separation between the dew point and our actual temperature, that's likely when we are going to be seeing that fog move in. And we could see that again tonight in, as I mentioned, in much of the province. But we'll see in Regina, not quite as hot temperatures, but that dew point moving in, bringing some humidity and possibly some thunderstorms heading through the rest of the weekend. Saskatoon, warmer for you folks, and that humidity is also picking up a little bit. So Dan, a few more nights with the air conditioner or windows open if you're sleeping at night.
It's not going to last.
I hope not.
So sad. Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
Astronomers are marveling at new pictures of Jupiter captured by the James Webb Space Telescope. This composite image shows auroras over the north and south poles of the planet. It also provides a new look at the Great Red Spot, the perpetual storm that churns over Jupiter's southern hemisphere. The spot appears white in the pictures because of reflected sunlight. In this wider image, you can also make out faint rings around Jupiter and 2 tiny moons. Welcome back. Tomorrow marks Independence Day in Ukraine. It also marks 6 months since the Russian invasion. And while Ukrainians get ready to celebrate their separation from the former Soviet Union, there are ominous rumblings that the fighting may about to get worse. CBC's Susan Ormiston is in Ukraine on the streets of the capital.
On Kyiv's main street, Ukraine's spoils of war. Instead of a big parade here Wednesday to mark Independence Day, the government has brought all these seized Russian vehicles. Here showcasing these weapons of war, charred and mangled from the early days when the Russians were stopped in their tracks trying to seize the capital early on. This is an example of Ukrainian resolve and endurance when, with the West's help, it was able to thwart Putin's plan to seize the capital quickly. But even as this line stretches for blocks, the war is grinding on now 6 months and threatening to drag into a second winter. There is no peace in sight. Last year, this street was full of Ukraine's finest military hardware as it celebrates its separation from the former Soviet Union, now 31 years ago. But this year, with fears of Russian attacks intensifying this week and with warnings from President Zelensky, large gatherings are banned. The subways are being reopened at night for use as potential air raid shelters. And U.S. intelligence is saying that Russia is preparing for fresh attacks against civilian infrastructure and government facilities. So Ukrainians, particularly in the south and east, are bracing themselves. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Kyiv.
Ethan's back with one last look at weather. Ethan, how are things looking tonight and into the rest of the week?
Well, we could see some fog develop in Regina, Dan, but by the time we get to tomorrow morning, possibly some lingering fog by 8 a.m. But I think that'll quickly burn off through the morning. We're at 16 degrees. We get to the noon hour and we'll be at 23. Mix of sun and clouds sticking around. Those east winds around 25 kilometers an hour or so. Saskatoon, I think less of a chance of fog for you folks, around 16. Sunny conditions, very nice. Light winds heading into the morning. And some sun sticks around as we head to the afternoon, 25. Keep in mind that humidex getting close to 30 degrees. A couple days ago, we showed you the orchard in Wascana Park, and not just the people enjoying the food. It looks like this deer up in Nipawin that Julie sent us is also munching on some crab apples as well, Dan. Lots of good food for them to eat this time of year.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
And that's it for us tonight. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/Sask or subscribe to the CBC YouTube channel. Glenn Reed will be back with more local news at 11. Thanks for watching, everybody.